People always imagined overnight gas station jobs were easy. They pictured someone sitting behind a counter drinking coffee, watching TV until sunrise. I used to think the same thing. Then I spent 8 months working the night shift at a gas station off Interstate 40 in eastern Oklahoma. After that, I stopped thinking nights were quiet. The station sat just far enough away from town that it mostly served truck drivers, travelers, and people who had no business being awake at 3 in the morning. There wasn't much around it. A closed tire shop, an abandoned motel with broken windows, a grain elevator about half a mile away. The interstate itself was close enough that I could hear 18-wheelers rumbling by even with the doors closed. My shift started at 10 p.m. I worked until 6 a.m. Every night followed the same routine. Count the register, check the pumps, restock drinks, mop the floor around 1, clean the coffee machines around 4, lock the side entrance after midnight. Simple, predictable. The station had 16 security cameras. Most were outside. 2 covered the store. 1 pointed directly at the register where I stood all night. The owner, Sam, loved those cameras. He checked them constantly. He'd call me over little things. You forgot to refill the windshield washer buckets. You missed a candy wrapper in aisle 3. So I knew they worked. Around Thanksgiving, business slowed down. The weather had turned cold. Some nights I'd go 20 or 30 minutes without seeing a customer. Those quiet stretches were the hardest. The humming refrigerators, the buzzing fluorescent lights, the coffee maker clicking on by itself. Every little sound seemed louder. One Wednesday, around 2:40 a.m., an old white pickup pulled into pump number 4. I noticed it because I hadn't seen another vehicle for almost half an hour. The truck looked like it had been through 100 winters. Rust around the wheel wells, one headlight dimmer than the other. No front license plate. An older man got out. Late 60s maybe. Heavy work jacket, gray baseball cap. He walked slowly like his knees hurt. He didn't pump gas. He came straight inside. "Evening," I said. He nodded, didn't smile. He wandered the aisles for several minutes without picking anything up. Finally, he walked to the counter. "Coffee still fresh?" I looked over. "I made a new pot about 20 minutes ago." He looked toward the coffee station, then back at me. "I'll pass." He stood there, not saying anything, just looking around the store. Finally, he asked, "What time do you close?" "We don't." He nodded once, then left. No purchase, no gas. He climbed back into the truck and drove away. Nothing strange about that. People stopped just to stretch their legs all the time. The odd part came later. Around 5 that morning, Sam called. "The register's short." "How much?" "1 coffee." I laughed. "I didn't sell a coffee." "You sure?" "The system says you did." He read the receipt number, the timestamp. 2:47 a.m., exactly when the old man had been standing at the counter. But I never rang up a coffee. I checked the machine. Still full, nothing missing. Sam assumed I'd forgotten. I paid the $1 and moved on. The next night, 2:46 a.m., the same truck pulled into pump 4, same driver, same jacket, same slow walk. This time he came straight to the counter. "Coffee still fresh?" "Yeah." He stared at me for several seconds. "I'll pass." Then he turned around and left. Again, no purchase, no gas. When I closed my register that morning, another missing coffee. Same price, same receipt pattern. Sam wasn't amused anymore. He pulled the camera footage. I watched it with him later that afternoon. The video clearly showed the man walking to the counter, standing there, talking to me, then leaving. What it didn't show was me using the register. My hands never touched it. The receipt still existed, printed automatically somehow. Sam frowned. Maybe the touchscreen's acting up. He replaced the register the following week. Problem solved. Or so we thought. 3 nights later, the truck came back, 2:44 a.m. Same routine, same question. "Coffee still fresh?" "I'll pass." He left. The brand new register printed another receipt. Coffee, $1.19, paid in cash. No one had opened the drawer. This time I checked immediately. The cash inside balanced perfectly. No extra money, no missing money. Just a receipt. I started dreading 240 every night, not because I thought the man was dangerous, because nothing he did made sense. He never threatened me, never acted strangely, never even raised his voice. He just appeared, asked about coffee, left. One snowy December night, business got unusually busy. 3 truckers came in together. A family stopped for snacks. A state trooper grabbed an energy drink. I almost forgot about the old man, until I looked outside. The pickup was already parked. Pump 4? I hadn't seen it arrive. The truckers were still inside joking around. The old man entered behind them. Nobody acknowledged him, not even by accident. He waited patiently behind the truckers. One by one, they checked out. When the line cleared, he stepped forward. "Coffee still fresh?" "Yes." "I'll pass." He walked out. One of the truck drivers frowned. "Who are you talking to?" "The guy." "What guy?" I looked toward the door. The pickup was pulling away. "You didn't see him." The truck driver looked genuinely confused. "There wasn't anybody there." I laughed awkwardly. "Sure." He shook his head. "You've been alone since we came in." That bothered me more than anything before. Maybe he simply hadn't noticed. People got distracted. Still, he'd been standing right there. Christmas week brought freezing rain. The parking lot became a sheet of ice. Around 1:30 a.m., a delivery driver slipped and hit his shoulder. While filling out the incident report, I noticed something. The old pickup's tire tracks. They led into the parking lot, straight to pump 4, then stopped. No tracks leaving. The snow behind the truck's parking spot remained untouched, like the vehicle had vanished. I stared at them until a customer pulled in and destroyed the pattern. I told myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep, nothing more. New Year's Eve was chaos. The station stayed packed all night. People buying drinks, lottery tickets, ice, beer from the attached liquor store before midnight. For the first time in weeks, the pickup never came. I remember actually smiling. Maybe whatever weird coincidence had finally ended. Then just before sunrise, I found a receipt lying on the floor behind the counter. Coffee, 2:46 a.m., paid in cash. I hadn't even been behind the register at that time. I'd been outside helping jumpstart someone's car. My coworker, Louis, had covered the counter. I asked him, "You sell a coffee around 2:45? "No." He checked his own transactions. Nothing. I showed him the receipt. His face changed. "I've seen that before." Turns out, he worked my shift every Tuesday. He'd never mentioned it because he thought I'd laugh. An older man, white pickup, always asking if the coffee was fresh, always leaving. It was the winter I started working nights at a regional hospital just outside Columbus, Ohio. The hospital wasn't particularly old. It had been renovated several times over the years, but parts of the basement still looked like they hadn't changed since the late 80s. Long beige hallways, fluorescent lights that hummed constantly, white-painted cinder block walls that seemed to absorb sound. I worked security, not the exciting kind. Most nights I walked laps around the property, checked emergency exits, responded to occasional arguments in the emergency department, and made sure nobody wandered into restricted areas. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. By midnight, visitors were gone. By 1, the place settled into its own rhythm. Monitors beeped behind closed doors. Cleaning carts rolled through empty corridors. Nurses whispered during shift reports. Every hour, I followed almost the exact same road. Emergency entrance, loading dock, generator room, north stairwell, basement pharmacy hallway, morgue corridor, then back upstairs. I could probably have walked it blindfolded. Around 3 in the morning, everything always felt different. Not scary, just quieter. Like the building itself got tired. It was February. Outside, freezing rain tapped softly against the windows. The parking lots reflected orange streetlights in long, shimmering streaks. Inside, everything smelled faintly of bleach and old coffee. I remember because I checked my watch. 3:14 a.m. Every single night, that seemed to be the slowest point. That was when I noticed him. He was sitting alone in the emergency waiting room. Gray hoodie, blue jeans, hands folded together, head slightly lowered. Nothing unusual about that. People came in during the middle of the night all the time, but something felt off. Not because of him, because the waiting room was supposed to be empty. The registration desk had nobody behind it. No nurse, no receptionist, no paperwork. Usually, if someone was waiting, there'd at least be a clipboard or an open chart nearby. I walked over. "Everything okay?" He looked up. Mid-40s maybe, short beard, calm expression. "I've been waiting." His voice sounded tired. I asked if he'd checked in. He nodded. "They told me someone would come." I apologized and told him I'd find a nurse. The emergency department was only 20 feet away. Inside, 2 nurses were laughing quietly over coffee. I asked who was covering the waiting room. Both of them looked confused. "What waiting room?" "The guys sitting out there." They looked at each other, then followed me. The room was empty, completely empty. One of the automatic doors slid open from the wind outside. Nobody else. The nurse frowned. "You serious?" I pointed. "He was literally right there." She checked outside. No footprints in the slush leading away from the entrance. Nothing. We shrugged it off. Maybe he'd walked into the restroom. Maybe another staff member had already taken him somewhere. It wasn't impossible. Hospitals were busy. Things happened quickly. I forgot about it until the next night. 3:16 a.m. Same chair, same hoodie, same posture. This time I didn't leave. I approached slowly. "You back again?" He looked up. "I've still been waiting." Those exact words, not similar, exact. I felt something tighten in my chest. I asked his name. He answered, "Michael." Last name too. I won't say it here because I never forgot it. I called registration directly. No patient by that name. No arrival, no check-in, nothing. While I was on the phone, I glanced away for maybe 2 seconds. When I looked back, the chair was empty again. I searched every hallway, bathrooms, emergency entrance, even outside. Nothing. No one. The automatic doors had never opened. The motion sensor logs later showed they hadn't activated during those minutes. That bothered me. Not because I believed anything impossible had happened, because it meant I couldn't explain where he'd gone. The third night, I decided to wait. At exactly 3:10 a.m., I sat across from the chair. Nobody. 3:11, 3:12, 3:13. Nothing. 3:14. The vending machine beside me clunked loudly. I looked toward it for maybe 1 second. When I turned back, he was already sitting there. I swear he hadn't walked in. I would have seen him. He simply was there. My heart started pounding. I stayed seated. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "Who are you waiting for?" He smiled faintly. "My wife." I asked her name. He gave it. I radioed upstairs. Labor and delivery. Nothing. No patient, no visitor, no employee. Wrong name. Wrong everything. He stared toward the hallway, like someone would appear any second. 5 minutes passed. I looked down to write the information in my notebook. When I looked up, empty chair. Again, no footsteps, no doors, nothing. I started writing every incident down. Dates, times, descriptions. My supervisor laughed, said fatigue played tricks. Night shifts did weird things to your brain. Maybe he was right. Then something happened that he couldn't explain either. A week later, I wasn't working. I had 2 nights off. When I came back, another guard named Trevor looked exhausted. "You ever see some guy in a gray hoodie?" I didn't answer. He kept talking. "Sits in the waiting room around 3? Every hair on my arm stood up. Trevor described him perfectly, without me saying a word. Same clothes, same chair, same sentence. "I've been waiting." Trevor had searched the building too. Never found him. Now there were 2 of us. Management checked security footage. Nothing. The camera facing the waiting room had experienced a strange glitch. Every recording between 3:13 and 3:18 showed several seconds of digital distortion. Not missing footage, just frozen frames. Every single night. Maintenance replaced the camera. The new one did exactly the same thing, always during those same minutes. One Friday in March, the weather got bad. Ice storm. Half the city lost power. Our generators kicked on. The hospital stayed operational. Most security cameras rebooted afterward, except one. Waiting room camera. It stayed offline for almost an hour. Guess who showed up? Trevor radioed me, voice shaking. "I've got your hoodie, guy." I ran. When I reached the waiting room, Trevor was standing alone, pale. "What happened?" He walked toward me, and I looked down at my radio because dispatch answered. He swallowed hard. Then he wasn't there anymore. Trevor quit 2 weeks later. Didn't say why. Just transferred to campus security somewhere else. Months passed. Summer arrived. I stopped expecting explanations. Then one morning near the end of my shift, an older nurse called me over. She'd worked there almost 30 years. I casually mentioned the man. She went completely quiet, then asked, "Gray hoodie?" I nodded. She sighed. "There was a man years ago." She explained he'd driven his pregnant wife to the hospital during a snowstorm. He'd gone to park the car, collapsed outside from a heart attack before he ever made it back inside. She said his wife never knew he'd made it to the hospital property. I asked his name. She told me. It matched exactly, every syllable, every letter. I asked where she'd heard the story. She shrugged. People talk. No records, no newspaper clipping, nothing official, just stories passed between night staff. I wanted proof, real proof. So I searched old employee newsletters, archived newspapers, county records. I never found anything. Not one obituary, not one accident report. Nothing. Maybe she'd remembered wrong. Maybe she'd mixed stories together. Maybe Michael had simply been a tired visitor, wandering around every night, somehow avoiding every camera and every employee. I don't know. I left that hospital 3 years later. Different job, different city, different life. Last winter, I went back to visit an old coworker. We grabbed coffee in the cafeteria around midnight. As I walked toward the exit, I looked into the emergency waiting room without really thinking. Most of the chairs were empty, except one. Gray hoodie, hands folded, head lowered, waiting. I didn't walk over this time. I just kept going, because after all those years, I still wasn't sure whether I was afraid of hearing him speak again, or afraid that this time he finally wouldn't. I never planned on working highway nights. I was a heavy equipment operator during the day for years. But after layoffs hit in late 2021, I took whatever work I could find. That ended up being overnight maintenance for a state highway department in northern Pennsylvania. Our job wasn't glamorous. We patched potholes, replaced damaged guardrails, cleared fallen branches, picked up shredded truck tires. Sometimes we'd spend an entire shift replacing reflectors that drivers never even noticed. The shift started at 8 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. Most nights there were 4 of us. Our supervisor, Rick, a guy named Evan who drove the dump truck, Carlos, who handled traffic control, and me. The rule was simple. Nobody worked alone. Not because of criminals, not because of wildlife, because highways at night were unforgiving. One distracted driver doing 70 miles an hour could kill you before you even heard the tires. So we stayed together. Always, at least. That was the plan. It happened during the first week of October. The leaves had just started changing. Cold enough for a jacket, not cold enough for gloves. The forecast called for patchy fog after midnight. By 11, it had rolled in exactly as predicted. Not thick enough to stop work, just enough that every flashing amber light reflected back at you. Everything looked farther away than it really was. Our assignment that night was easy. Replace several damaged reflector posts between mile markers 212 and 216. It should have taken 3 hours. Traffic was light, mostly long-haul trucks and the occasional pickup. We parked on the shoulder with every warning light flashing. Cones stretched almost 200 feet behind us. Carlos handled traffic. Evan unloaded supplies. Rick marked the damaged posts on his clipboard. I started replacing them one by one. It was repetitive work. Dig, set, level, move 20 yards, repeat. Around 1:15 a.m., Rick called for a quick coffee break. We climbed back into the trucks for 10 minutes. Someone joked about deer being smarter than drivers. Someone else complained about overtime paperwork. Nothing unusual. At exactly 1:31 a.m., we went back out. That's when I noticed him, about 300 yards ahead, walking along the shoulder, reflective safety vest, hard hat, headlamp. At first I assumed he was another highway worker, maybe from the bridge crew, but something didn't fit. His vest wasn't the same color as ours. Ours were bright fluorescent yellow. His looked older, almost faded silver under the lights. I pointed him out. Rick looked up. "Who's that?" Nobody knew. The man never looked toward us. He just kept walking north, slowly, steadily, always on the shoulder. Rick grabbed the radio. "This is Unit 7. Anybody working north of us tonight?" Dispatch answered almost immediately. "Negative." Rick repeated the question. Same answer. No scheduled crews, no contractors, no utility workers. We figured maybe he'd broken down somewhere. Rick yelled, "Hey!" The man never reacted. Didn't turn, didn't wave, nothing. He just kept walking. Carlos offered to drive up and check on him. Rick shook his head. "Finish this section first." We did. It took maybe 15 minutes. When we climbed back into the truck, the man was still walking. Same pace, same distance ahead. That made no sense. He should have been gone by then. Rick drove forward, not fast, maybe 15 miles an hour. The distance never seemed to close. Every time we thought we were getting near him, he was still roughly 300 yards away, like we were following him without actually gaining. Finally, Rick sped up, 30, then 40. The road was completely clear. Still, the gap looked exactly the same. No one spoke. Eventually, Rick muttered, "What the hell?" He pushed the truck close to 50. The figure disappeared into the fog. Just vanished, not dramatically, just gone. We reached the spot seconds later. Nobody. No footprints in the damp gravel shoulder, no parked vehicle, no side road, nothing. We searched with flashlights, empty. Rick wasn't smiling anymore. Back to work. Nobody argued. About an hour later, around 3 a.m., I was installing another reflector when I heard Evan yell from behind me. "You guys see him?" I turned, the same reflective vest. This time, behind us, walking south, the opposite direction, same pace, head down, like he'd never noticed us. Carlos got angry. He walked straight toward the man. "Sir!" No response. Carlos started jogging. The figure rounded a slight bend in the highway. Carlos followed. 5 seconds later, he stopped. The road beyond the bend was empty. Flat, straight, nowhere to hide. No trees close enough, no ditch deep enough, nothing. Carlos came back, looking pale. I was 20 feet behind him. Nobody laughed. The radio stayed strangely quiet after that. Normally, dispatch checked in every 30 minutes. Nothing. Rick tried calling twice. Static. Only static. At 3:42 a.m., a tractor trailer slowed beside us. The driver rolled down his window. "You boys lose somebody?" Rick frowned. "What do you mean?" "I almost hit one of your workers about a mile back." Every one of us looked at each other. "We've all been here." The truck driver pointed behind him. Guy in a reflective vest. He drove away before we could ask anything else. That was enough for Rick. He ordered everyone into the trucks. We drove the entire 4-mile work zone. Nothing. No worker, no vehicle, no footprints, no dropped equipment, nothing. The next morning after clocking out, Rick filed an incident report, mostly because of what the truck driver had said. A week later, he told us the report had gone nowhere. No missing workers, no stranded motorists, no emergency calls from that stretch of highway. Case closed, or it should have been. 3 weeks later, we were assigned another section. Different county, nearly 60 miles away. Completely different highway, different project. Around 2 a.m., I happened to look in the passenger side mirror. Far behind us, walking along the shoulder, was someone wearing a faded reflective vest. Head down, same slow pace. I didn't say anything. Not at first. I kept watching. Every few seconds, the truck rounded gentle curves. Sometimes the figure disappeared behind the guardrail, then reappeared, always walking, always the same distance back. When we stopped to unload equipment, I climbed out immediately. The highway behind us was empty. Rick noticed my expression. "You see him too?" I hadn't told anyone. I just nodded. Rick stared down the road for a long moment before quietly saying something that still bothers me years later. I transferred districts because of that. What? I used to see him on my old route. He climbed back into the truck without explaining. I asked him again during lunch a few nights later. He refused to talk about it. Just shook his head. I should have kept my mouth shut. Rick retired the following spring. Carlos moved to another state. Evan went back to construction. We never worked together again. A few months ago, I was driving that same highway with my wife. Middle of the afternoon, bright sunshine, normal traffic. As we passed mile marker 214, she glanced out the passenger window and casually asked, "Why is that highway worker walking so close to traffic?" I looked over. There wasn't anyone there. She kept looking through the rear window for another few seconds before saying, Never mind." I didn't ask her what she'd seen. She didn't describe it. And I never told her about those nights, because after all these years, I still check my mirrors whenever I drive after midnight. Not because I expect to see a broken down car or a stranded worker. I look because every once in a while, for just a second, I catch the faint flash of a reflective vest in the darkness. By the time I look again, the shoulder's empty.